According to his own Washington Post op-ed, the State Department's Mr. Weiner passed the second dossier to Fusion GPS's Steele. Then, in turn, it was shared with the FBI by Steele. Mr. Weiner, in the 90s, worked in the State Department investigating transnational organized crime and had special insight into Russian attempts to recruit and compromise influential people, as we know from Carter Page, often unbeknownst to those individuals. From what we know, the second dossier just details the same pea and prostitute story the Steele dossier details, nothing new or different. This was probably, at some level, considered corroborating evidence, since the sources were different Russian intelligence officers than the Russian intelligence officers the Steele dossier used. Turns out, Mr. Weiner was speaking to Sidney Blumenthal. It's going to be real funny when the press starts challenging Republicans on air by defending Blumenthal, an old-school Clinton hatchet man. Blumenthal, a big-name boogeyman of the right, was working closely with Shearer, who Mr. Weiner blames for the second dossier. Shearer, another old-school Clintonista, worked closely with Blumenthal, selling intelligence products from Libya and around the globe, sending many of the reports directly to Secretary Clinton, most likely for money. You can hardly say Shearer without Blumenthal being in the same breath. Did it ever occur to Mr. Weiner at State, with all his prior experience and shocking concern about Russian interference, that Shearer and Steele might be unknowing Russian agents? They both were fed by Russian intelligence, after all. Now, I'm not too concerned with Mr. Weiner at this point. We'll find out plenty more with him and former Secretary John Heinz Kerry at some point. What we have found is a second injection point for the salacious pea and prostitute story in the dossier. First Steele, and now longtime Clinton zombies Blumenthal and Shearer, out trying to save the world by destroying it. I'd like to see the FBI's FISA warrant on Shearer. We'll see that he was communicating with Russian spies. Wasn't Shearer and Steele's conversations also picked up by the U.S. Foreign Spy Network? Let's then see Shearer's unmasking requests. Or was Samantha Power's hundreds of unmasking requests just targeting political enemies? Get this. Former President Obama's ambassador to the United Nations, of all people, had hundreds of unmasking requests in her name, right up to Trump's inauguration day. I would imagine all those conversations are still on file somewhere. Did it ever occur to them that Russia might be trying to influence the U.S. election via themselves? No, of course not. It's not us. It's something we're just not capable of. We're defenders of the utopia, bringers of the dystopia. Oh, and it's also a case, folks, of not understanding what the heck a cyber attack really constitutes, as we saw with the NSA contractor Reality Winner, who sacrificed everything to steal data that actually said the Russians had very limited involvement in the cyber end of the election. She just didn't understand what she had. Typical Bernie supporter, not very bright.